Hello, Simon here. Second podcast in a row that I've felt the need to put some kind of disclaimer, and this week's disclaimer is that this show is a bit sweary. Not awfully sweary, more in quantity rather than how bad it is, but it's there. I usually bleep things out, but I pretty much lost track of where all the swear words were, and I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to bleep out most of it, I should bleep out all of it, or none of it, and I haven't got a huge amount of time, so I've gone with the none of it. So there you go, you have been warned. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Large Format Photography Podcast. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by Andrew Bartram and Erik Mathy. Sorry, I just messed that up again. That's two podcasts on the trot.
Don't edit it. We're not allowing you to edit it. You've got to keep it in.
Yeah.
You got the last part right.
Exactly. Yeah.
You butchered Eric. What did you call him?
I stuck an L in there somehow.
It's fine.
So
it's fine. I answered it. Enrique, Eric. It's fine. It's all good. Hey, you. It's all good.
Well, it went well last time, so yes, we'll keep it in there. And and talking about that, I'll just also say thank you for our guest last time was Shane Balkowicz. I said it right. I got that bit right at least. So, Shane, it was such a pleasure to have you with us last time. It was absolutely incredible. So, thank you again, Shane, for being with us. And I've just realised I've already just skipped the bit where I say hello, Andrew.
Oh, hi, Simon.
And hello, Eric.
Hello, how are you doing, Simon?
There you go. So we're completely topsy-turvy. So on that note, I think we'll just get straight over to the fens and see what Andrew's been up to.
Been on 2 weeks holiday, and we took the caravan to the Lake District, and I exposed some large format film in a pinhole camera, and we walked loads up and down what I thought were enormous mountains, but they probably weren't really. So that's it, and we had a wonderful time, and I'm back at work today, which is a bit grim, but anyway.
Define large format.
4x5 pinhole cameras.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Are you asking me to define large format, or
yeah? I was wanting
go back and listen to show 1 and see if you can work it out, because I'm not sure.
All right.
I'm not sure.
Well, I was just wanting to know 4x5. You know.
Yeah. No, I do have. I'm staring at an 8x10 pinhole camera, but I only have one film holder for that because the things are so expensive.
Yes, they are. Self-made or commercially made?
The pinhole camera is self-made, but not by me. It's actually a prototype version that guy called James Guerin. Reality
I know
so
James.
Subtle. Do you?
I have that exact camera. Is it the one with 4 pinholes?
This has got 4 pinholes, yeah. And so I've got James's prototype MDF version. He sent it to me in the post out of the blue.
I have.
He didn't send me a cheap film holder though.
No, I have his that same camera, the second or third 8x10 he ever made without the filter add-on.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. I love James. That guy's work is incredible. I think he's the best pinhole camera maker around.
He's now making a pinhole camera with a pinhole on each side. It's 35mm film. So on one roll of film, you can shoot the film as normal or red scale. So through the non-emulsion side, all on one camera.
Oh man, I love that guy.
And he's been a guest on the Lensless podcast, which is the other podcast I get involved in. We've had him on a couple of times. He's a good friend of the show.
Yeah, I've had the joy of chatting with him a fair bit over the years. I've got one of his 6x6s.
Me too. 6x12 I've got.
Oh, jealous. I'm jealous.
He does a 6x17 as well. I haven't got that. I'm thinking about getting the 6x6 with the 2 pinholes, though, because I've got the 6x6 with a filter ring on it, you know?
Yeah, that's the one I have. To me, that is, not to go on tangents or anything, but that 6x6 with the filter on it is the fastest, best, most like street photography like pinhole camera I've ever used.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's brilliant. It just shoots so fast. Like you set it up, you shoot it, you're done. Like you can take a shot in 3 seconds, start to finish, which for a pinhole is like lightning, you know? And then you throw a red filter and shoot infrared film in it. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I was doing that last week. Well, semi-infrared, it's that Ilford SFX stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've shot a ton of that. That stuff is brilliant. I wish they made that in 4x5.
Well, it's good for you to come on the Lensless podcast, Eric. That's great.
I've got a question. Just going back to what you're saying about shooting two types of film at the same time, red scale and...
No, so you're shooting the same roll of film, but red scale, of course, in order to shoot red scale in a camera, you go in the dark, well, you buy a roll, or like I do, you go in the dark room and you unspool a roll, or I don't bother doing that. You just roll it backwards into another 35mm cassette, so that when you put it in your camera, you're shooting through the
halation layer,
the anti-halation layer. You know, not through the emulsion side. So what James has done is made a camera where frame 1 can be just a normal, you know, a portrait or something, and then the frame 2, you can open the other pinhole and shoot it with red scale. So you can have a mixture of red scaled images and normal images all on the same roll.
Yeah,
I'm actually not surprising, I guess. I'm actually doing almost that not quite, but almost that exact same thing with 4x5 right now. Except that I'm essentially shooting, and this came from a process that a guy named Kelly Shane Fuller up in Oregon prototyped a few years back. But essentially, you load a normal panchromatic film, right? In this case, Ilford Delta like 100. You okay there, Simon? Simon's being attacked by aliens right now.
Yeah, we're still there. There is some interference going on somewhere.
I couldn't hear it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then you take an orthochromatic film, like a lithographic film, a really thin base, right? Mm-hmm. And you stack them because you can load them at the same time in a film holder.
Yeah.
And then when you shoot, the light goes through the orthochromatic film, which is blue sensitive, and typically has like a magenta anti-halation layer base. And then that light hits your panchromatic film as if it's been filtered through a magenta filter, right?
Yep.
And then from there, his process, because one is blue sensitive and now one has been exposed through a red filter, you develop them and then you can combine them into a 2-color bichrome image. Because back in the day,
that's what they used to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially during the war. I think it was World War II. The United States Kodak, they didn't have any dyes. The dye industry was all in Germany. So we went to war, we lost all the photo dyes. So they converted Kodachrome, like the early color chrome films, from a 3 dye to a 2 dye, right? Red and I believe it's blue, because those two combine, and then your eye fills in the green layer for you. And you can create this. It's this really beautiful sort of washed out color film.
Well,
so I'm playing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go on. You finish.
I say so. I'm trying to work that process out, and it's been really interesting.
So the early color experiments from monochrome to color were done through shooting through 3-color films and filters and recombining the image. And if you dig back into another great podcast, which must be right up your street, called the Homemade Camera Podcast.
Really?
Right, and you go back into, I don't know which episode it is, fairly early on. I'm going to say within the first 20 episodes, then Graham and Nick, the hosts, there's 3 hosts now, but it was just those 2. They talk about designing such a camera today, you know, with mirrors and things to bounce the light around and where you'd put the filters and so.
Yeah, we were. I was actually looking into that too, like. If shooting the 2 sheets of film at the same time wasn't working properly, if the anti-halation dye in this particular brand of lithofilm, I'm using the Arista Ortho Litho because it's really inexpensive. It's like 25 cents a sheet. You know, you can't get cheaper large format film. If that wasn't the right filtration of how do you build the same thing, like since I've been taking a crack at building cameras lately, you know, where do you get a semi-translucent mirror? How much light has to pass through it? Where do you put the filter for it?
Yes. They were talking about that, Eric. They were talking about that semi-translucent mirrors.
Yeah,
and I didn't quite get it all at the time because I'm having to visualize all this in my head, But go back or get in touch with Graham and Nick from the Homemade Camera Pod. Send them an email or something, and tell them we've had this conversation and say which show do I go and look at, or did you ever build that camera?
They listen to this show, by the way, so they may find you, Eric.
We'll give them
all
a
right,
shout
please,
out.
by all means.
Yeah, you may well find yourself on their show.
Let's do it. I actually also reached out to a gentleman named Nick, who's one of the conservators at the Kodak Eastman House, right? The George Eastman House. Him and Mark Osterman, they essentially recreate old photo processes.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, we have some of those lying right here. Let me send you a phone photo." And he sends me a phone photo of the two bichrome, Kodachrome images, individualized, and then put together this portrait. They're like, I can't remember, they're 4x5, so it's just brilliant. You can see like this really deep red image and this really like almost mint green, cyan blue image, and it puts them together on a light table and just, boom, beautiful color portrait. And then he showed me the 8x10 camera that they have just sitting in their collection. That was a prototype for a different process. Like this is Rochester. You two have to get to Rochester, and you have got to go through. I'll introduce you to Mark and Nick. They just have this collection of cameras, and because Rochester was the center of the optical hub of America, and in some cases you could argue the world, because of George Eastman through the 70s or 80s. I mean, even when I went to school in Rochester for photography, photojournalism, before digital, it still was like Xerox was there, Bosch and Lomb was there, Kodak was there. It was like the place for optical stuff and film. So there's just like, you throw a rock and you smack off of like 5 old wood large format cameras that some engineer, somebody's grandfather was an engineer at like the Rochester Camera Company, and he just had the shit in his garage. Like there's just cameras littering the landscape in Rochester. And the Eastman House is just collecting them and putting them on shelves. It's ridiculous. It's really, really cool. Because I was like, "Where'd you get this 8x10 camera?" He's like, "It's just this random prototype we picked up." I was like, "Okay, cool." So yeah, it's
Eric. Going back to your film process, what about X-ray film? So the Fuji HRT. Double-sided, double emulsion. So there's an interesting third fact, but that's orthochromatic. You can get a box of 8x10 for $30.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a box of 100. Well,
yeah,
so cheap, isn't it?
It's really cheap. I've tended to because when you get 8x10 film, X-ray film, you have to cut it down, right? Which is fine. You can
you can get 8x10 version.
Yeah, but if you shoot 4x5,
yeah, sure.
Right, you end up cutting it down.
Yeah. Oh, is it me or Eric?
Yeah, we've lost you, Eric. No, we've still lost you. Speak, Eric. Well, your mouth is moving.
Yeah, the funny thing is we can actually see him, which is unusual for the podcast.
And I don't think he can actually hear us at all.
No, he's just talking to himself.
He is.
He'll realise. Yeah. At some point he'll stop and realise that we're not listening.
Yeah. It looks really interesting what he's saying, though. I mean, there's hand gestures. It looks like he's driving a car. Yeah.
Can we message him or something? Maybe message him or something.
Yeah. At some point he'll pause for breath and realise that he can't hear anything.
Do you think he'll pause for breath?
It doesn't look like it, does it?
I'm just trying to work out the hand signals now.
Yeah. I think it was plunging a sink. I think that's what he did last. Yeah. And he's still going.
This is a great outtake.
It is. It is. Well,
he doesn't realise it must be a minute or so he's been soliloquising.
Yeah.
In a grandiose manner.
Yeah. Oh, this looks so interesting.
Oh, this is where we should be on video, isn't it, really? This podcast should be on video. This would be so much fun.
It is. I'll send him a message. Hopefully he'll read this. We cannot hear you! Exclamation mark as well, just to give it more impact. He's still going.
In some ways, he's the perfect guest because you just have to wind him up and set him off.
He's nodding his head at the moment.
Does he realise? He realises now.
No, I don't think he realises. Eric, we cannot hear you. Put the cup down.
I'm going to put I'm going to lift my laptop up and put my camera on. How about that?
No, still nothing. Put your hand on your forehead if you can hear us.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
No.
Not for 2 minutes. All these invites we've got to go places and we can't travel anywhere, can we?
No. And not that it's that easy to go to all of these places anyway.
Well, what an American road trip we could have if we had like a year off, eh?
Oh, yeah. Via Slovenia.
Yeah.
And Norway.
Yeah, around the world, really.
Yeah.
Japan. I've got an invite to go to Japan. Yeah.
Well, that's fine because I can't hear you either. And for some reason, I'm still on it. How weird is that?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can absolutely hear you.
Yeah.
And you're frozen in time on another screen as well.
Yeah.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. That's okay. As long as that other screen doesn't like...
It was extremely funny watching you because whatever it was you were saying, you were going on for about 2 minutes, waving your arms around.
Yeah, gesturing, everything.
I use my I gesture. I can't help it. What did you last hear that was probably boring you?
Well, you were talking about Rochester and old lenses being littered. Oh, we spoke about X-ray films. X-ray, I got onto that.
Yep.
And then cutting down 4x5s. Yeah.
Yep.
You invariably scratch it, don't you? You know.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I go to the Kodak single-sided stuff because it's much less prone to scratching the hell out of, which I inevitably do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I've got to say, if that was the answer, then to what you've just been saying, and we've been watching you, then it was far more interesting the first time you answered that question.
Well, I also mentioned that I've figured out, and I'm happy to share the recipe, that film is typically shot at like 25 or 50 ASA. How to push it to 200.
Which film are you talking about now? Sorry.
Any X-ray film, usually the Kodak in specific, but most X-ray films are shot at like 50. I've figured out a good way to develop that at 200 ASA and still get some pretty nice tonal, not too contrasted results. So if anyone's interested in really pushing that film around at a much higher speed than usual, I'm happy to share the recipe. I'll go into the Facebook group. I'll put it up there.
Yeah, do that. Because there's a lot of people interested in X-ray film. I just use the Fuji stuff. And in fact, James Guerin is really good at using it. And he gave me all the information on processing that particular type of film. In fact, what he's doing now, he's taking 8x10 sheets, cutting them down to 4x10, and splicing 8 to 10 of those 4x10 sheets together. And he's printed or made some large format rolls. So he's making large format roll film for a pinhole camera. So he's going to be like a beefed up version of his Reality So Subtle 6x17, but it's going to be 4x10. Using roll film that he makes himself from X-ray.
I love that guy. I love that guy. Actually, at one point in time, unless he's found a new supplier, a couple of years ago, that's how I got he traded me like 2 or 3 of those boxes of Fuji 8x10 because he couldn't get it in France. So he pinged me. I was like, hey, if you can get those, can you ship them to me? And then I'll send you an 8x10 pinhole that I've been working on. I was like, sure, man, let's do it. Yeah. So I bought the film and shipped it over, and then he shipped me over an 8x10 camera, and Bob's your uncle, was my uncle in that case, as they say. Yeah, it was great. So he may still be shooting that stuff. I sent him like 300 sheets of it. It's a really small world over here in the fringe. It should be noted.
It is. It is.
A really small world.
Did you start the show recording again, Simon? Or
This is going out, and I think
I'm completely confused now about what's going on.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of those that time where we were describing what we were seeing of Erik in his hand gestures and what he was doing, that will live into the podcast forever, I think.
Fucking perfect. Yes, I'll take it. But I actually asked Simon what he was up to. I mean, we know Andrew just went out and shot large format.
Oh, right. So, yeah.
I mean, Simon.
Yeah. Well,
dude.
I've what have I been doing apart from making things? I've been doing a lot of making things lately, but I did actually. This still involves making things. I bought a lot of. When I say a lot, as in auction lots, lots of photographic gear last week, and there's a couple of. Well, the large format related stuff that was in there was I bought quite a few really old lenses, probably turn of the century stuff, but not barrel lenses, always shutters, Bosch and Lomb,
really?
that kind of stuff, yeah, and some really old Kodak stuff. I don't know if they were how large formatty they are. They might be off like some of the very big box cameras that you used to get, like, and the big old roll film, that kind of thing, which nobody at home could see.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the old they're the Rochester optical brass lenses.
Yep. That's it.
Yep.
I think I got two of those and a few other bits and bobs. But there was also a 16 by 24 panoramic camera that I picked up. Except it wasn't. It was something that it was a homemade camera. So another homemade camera podcast interest part. And this, but it was made with MDF. The back part of the camera, so it weighed a ton. And it's got some huge bellows on it, which I haven't actually worked out how the bellows are actually supported, but they were panoramic bellows. It was that kind of shape. And again, homemade, and these bellows, really good, really good bellows. And then attached to this camera was a 4x5 press camera lens. I'm not thinking, really, a 135 Optar from a Speed Graphic. And that's going to do 16 by 24?
Not likely.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, maybe if you... I mean, it is a case that... I mean, certainly hasn't got a hope in anything to do infinity focus, but obviously the further the extension, the larger the image circle becomes. So perhaps it might be for panoramic macro shooting or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I would love to see that thing, actually. Well, one, because I love homemade cameras and whatnot, and I have this massive, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have this massive soft spot for panoramics. Mm-hmm. I think panoramics are absolutely fascinating as a format. I think it might go back to college where, Rochester, RIT, they've got the cage of all this equipment that you'll never be able to afford, as a working adult. But one of them was, a swing lens panoramic camera, right? And it just fascinated me. They were super fun to shoot, but the results were just really, really interesting. And I've never been able to. I do have a 6x17 3D printed panoramic medium format. That's really great. But like in terms of a full bore panoramic with actual optics and whatnot, like the Fuji 617s and or like a 4" by 10" which is just a total like dream. I've never had one, but I think they just fascinate me. Like it's one of those formats I would love to get into. So if some lunatic from like whatever 1940 decide to build their own large format panoramic, like I would like to see that. It's almost like an exercise in psychology. Like when you look at that camera or other cameras that you pick up that somebody's hacked together and try to reverse engineer it, it has sometimes less to do with the technical aspects and more like, what the hell were they thinking?
Exactly. Well,
right?
That's the case with this. The main part of the camera is MDF. MDF is not light. It's not a portable thing, especially when it's going to be that large. I just don't know where they would ever get used, which is, I don't know if it was more of a case of somebody bought some massive bellows and thought, I can do something with this. And
right.
And that was it, and then stopped when he realised that his press lens wouldn't actually give the coverage.
Right.
So I don't know.
He just had that individual. It could be she, who knows? But that person just had like And by the way, I just had to, not being in the trades or anything, I just had to like quick Google what MDF is, medium density fiberboard.
Yes.
Right. I assume. Right.
Yes.
They just had a ton of that laying around the garage or the shop, and just whacked together something with it that they wanted to whack together. Yeah. You know, I just had it lying about and just took a crack at it. You know,
what are the bellows made out of, Simon?
I'm not entirely sure. It's I haven't actually got the thing at my house, so I can't go over it for. I've not looked at it particularly closely, but it's a flexible rubberized material with tape and maybe some more MDF around the edges.
Okay.
Yeah, but it appears to be very, very well made. That part of it, at least, anyway. And it was a man, by the way, because I know it was an estate sale, the good news is it wasn't like a deceased estate sale.
Okay.
But I do know that it was a gentleman that was told in no uncertain terms that he had to get rid of his collection of cameras and fishing rods,
or he'd get a divorce
and whiskey.
So he's alive. You can go back and say, mate, what were you? What were you? Can we talk about your state of mind?
It could be possible, I suppose, but he's in Scotland. He's a long way away, but there are things like telephones, aren't there, and things like that. But I never. But he was at an auction, so you don't get to know exactly who the person is. But I do know the story behind the auction at least. But on panoramics, I'm a big fan of panoramic cameras, and while I was there, I tried to buy a wide lux. Which would have been so cool, but that went way too much. And also there was a Horseman 612 that went for way too much for me as well. But
what did the wide lux go for? Sorry, Simon. What did the wide lux go for?
I think it was about £600. I think.
Yeah, that seems to be about the going rate on eBay, doesn't it?
Yeah. Don't forget you've also got buyer's premium and tax on top of that as well. So you've got to add about 25% onto that to get your final price.
That was the camera that made me fall in love with them, was the wide lux in college.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
Andrew and I have both got Horizon cameras, slightly different models, but 35mm swing lenses with a 28mm lens for 35mm film, which is super fun. But I also, I'm really, really pleased about the other thing. I mean, we're not really doing much large format here, but I'm too excited not to talk about it. Now we're talking about panoramas.
Let's do it.
And that is an FT2 camera, which is a Soviet panorama camera that came out of a tank. And that used an Industar lens, so it's a Tessar formulation lens, f5. For whatever reason, it's an f5 lens, not 5.6, 5. And it's a swing lens. Takes 35mm film, and the negatives are 20. This is millimeters now. 24 by 110. So huge swing.
They're like a little metal sandwich almost.
That's
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's surprising how small they are. When you say little, when I'd seen pictures of them, I never realised just how small they are, because they don't take conventional film. Or rather, they take conventional film, but you have to load the film into the canisters that then slot into it, because a conventional 35mm film canister is too tall for it.
Right. Yeah. I've looked into those during a panoramic, like, mad research phase of trying to figure out, like, if I could afford lay my hands on a panoramic somehow, mostly around originally. You remember, like, actually, here's a brilliant one if you can find one. Kodak, I think it was Kodak, made a brilliant, beautiful swing lens, brass swing lens panoramic in the early 1900s that shot, I think it was a 127. There's a couple different formats.
There's different models, isn't there? Like a Model B, and some of them would take 120 film, and then they get larger and smaller. I think I can't remember what they call them.
It's the Kodak #1 Panoram.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and they're just brilliant cameras. And I think while I was researching those, I stumbled across that funky little Russian FT2. And I was like, what is this itty bitty little thing? So, yeah, those things are crazy.
I have a fascination as well, because panorama is just brilliant. From shooting just those cheap plastic faux panorama ones, that take 35mm film. They're just fun to use.
Yeah.
On my 4x5 camera, I have the 6x17 Chinese back.
Oh, how is that?
That's excellent. Yeah, no, it's really good.
Okay.
They're not cheap though. They're going up. I didn't pay. There's probably now you're having to pay 400 odd quid for one of those.
Yeah,
but it works really well. Simon's seen it, haven't you? That weird thing I've got that going back.
We tried to do that double exposure
we don't
challenge for the Negative Positives podcast last year, which failed miserably.
We did, yeah. But I took my I did a mod for shooting 35mm film in my Texas Leica, my GW692. Right. So that produces a negative, and I know this because I'm looking at the Emulsive article now. 83mm by 24, so that's still that's a pretty wide aspect ratio.
I actually took a 6.9 back and put it on my Intrepid 4x5, and then tried to stitch together panoramics purely through front element shift. Right, just cram it to the left, do the first shot, advance it, and then cram it to the right, do the second shot to try to minimize, lens shift and whatnot. And then just develop them and slap them together and see how well it would work. It worked okay. It wasn't like a genuine 6x18 or something really, really big and massive. I think it came out to a 6x13 or 14 maybe tops. But it worked. It worked pretty well, actually, all things considered. So it's just not nearly as cool as and let's face it, the aesthetic of having a lens that goes and rotates, that shit's just cool. You can't get away from the roboto part of the aesthetic of shooting. Because a lot of things, I think not sometimes, but with photography is partially it's the image, but also it's the process, right? It's especially large format. It's a process you go through to make the image. That's almost to a certain extent as important as the resulting image for your personal satisfaction.
Yes,
right.
I'm totally on board with that, and I just need to mention the homemade podcast again, homemade camera podcast again, because on the subject of panoramic cameras, Graham on the show has a 3D printed camera, and I've actually just dropped a link into our little chat called the Kraken, and that's a 6x12 camera that uses a large format lens to get the field of view, to get the panoramic aspect ratio, and so that's about probably. I'm not sure if this is the cheapest way to actually get a 6x12 camera, but it's certainly cheaper than the £1,000 plus for the Horseman camera that does exactly the same thing. So,
the cheapest way for me that I've found. Oh yes, this design is really.
This is $30 for the file. Then you get if you know a friend with a 3D printer to print it for you.
This design is with the big cone is really popular. I was going to say one of the cheapest ways I've found to shoot panoramic 6x14 is you get one of the old Kodak tourist cameras, the pocket cameras, that shot a now dead format. I'm spacing which format it is. But you just get a couple of adapters to put 120 film in the back, right? And just put in a mask so the film is forced to lay flat a little bit. And, those cameras, you can get them all day long in good shape, where the bellows is intact and the lens is still perfectly functional. You spend a little bit of money either to get some pre-done adapters or have a friend print out the film school adapters, and they shoot absolutely brilliantly sharp, edge to edge, fantastically exposed 6x14 black and white negatives with just the lens that's built on it. Yeah. And you can get them all day long. I converted mine with just black file folder paper, which is a little bit stiffer than standard, essentially a slightly heavier duty, smoother cardboard or construction paper. Sorry. It's a 0.5 millimeter thick, and just taped it in. Took it to Hawaii, and it was brilliant. Just brilliant. And they're so cheap, and they look really cool. You take one of those old big leather Kodak cameras out, and it's a pocket camera. How big were their freaking pockets that they could fit a camera larger than a building brick into that pocket? Good Lord, man! What pocket do you have that fits that? Someone needs to explain to me. And they all wore suits back then. Where is that? What? Anyways, maybe somebody was just being cheeky. and like tongue in cheek and saying pocket camera, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But anyways, lay your hands on some of those and just put in the mask, get the film adapters, and just shoot 6x14 to your heart's content for almost absolutely nothing. You just have to make sure the bellows are clean and the lens isn't too gummed up in terms of its shutter mechanics. But I've got like probably 6 of those things in the garage waiting to be converted to panoramics to just sell on the cheap for people who want to do it.
The other easy way, of course, is if you want to go wide, the 6x9, my 6x9 Netar folder is currently I've currently got a roll of Fomapan in there.
Yeah,
you just have to work out how many rotations on the knob you need to turn before for your next frame.
Yeah.
So there's lots of cheap options, but there's some really high end stuff out there as well. But that back I've got for my 4.5 camera, of course, is great, but it's a bit on the expensive side now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. Like when we go back to talking about like the manner in which you take the images to try to like, as much as the tangents into medium format panoramics are fun, to drag it back into what people are actually here for, which is like large format and shenanigans. Like, do you think, no insult to the 3D printers in the house, but is 3D printing a camera, like a full camera, right? Is that the same thing as making / building your own? Like is buying like a Goodman medium format kit or downloading some plans and just like throwing them onto a 3D printer, of which again, there's no shame in that, constitute building your own camera? Or is it like the madman whose crazy panoramic camera you picked up at auction?
Yeah.
Like where does that fall?
No, it's an interesting question, and I think it depends on where you're sitting on this, and that, for instance, you can download, like we just mentioned the Kraken. You've already mentioned Dora Goodman. There are designs out there, including 4x5 cameras, which are open source and free to download, and you can print them yourself. And for me, that's a kit, so right. It's as simple as that, and you can get a lot of satisfaction by putting a kit together. I don't think there's a huge amount of difference whether you're actually 3D printing that yourself or somebody's printing it for you and then you put it together, because at the end of the day, you're just feeding the information. Somebody's done the work and you feed it into your printer, or it's just going to come in the post. I don't think there's much in that. There's a certain amount of satisfaction to see this thing appear from nothing on a 3D printer, but no, it's a kit. That's how I take it. Whereas if you design the camera yourself from the ground up, you've gone onto your computer, you may have drawn this by hand, and then you're transferring the diagram onto a computer and you're designing it. Everything is shaped in the way that you've chosen it to be, and then ultimately by the time it comes out and it's printed off, I absolutely view that in exactly the same way as if somebody had taken several pieces of wood, shaved it lovingly, lacquered it, or whatever. There's a skill set there that I'm talking from myself personally now. I know I could not do those things. Yes, I suppose I could make something that worked that looked awful, but you know what? Would that matter if I've made it myself? It doesn't really matter. But would it work? And I don't even know if it would work or not. But I know that I can design something and produce it, and I would have the same amount of pride, if you like, I think, as somebody that had made something else with their hands. Maybe.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's. What do you think, Andrew?
I don't really have a view on what the answer. Not should be, but there's a kind of implication in your question that one is kind of better than the other. Whether you meant it to be like that, I don't know. But
fair.
And I don't think it matters really if you're crap at woodwork, but you can design something on a 3D printer, using software like Simon has taught himself to do that. But what it's doing though, all this technology is just opening up a whole range of possibilities and formats and panoramic cameras to the masses in a way, because we can't afford hassle. What are they? Those panoramic cameras, the Hasselblad,
That's about the XP2s.
X-Pan,
Yeah,
yes.
X-Pans.
We can't afford those. Or the Fuji 6x17s. They're just bonkers prices,
Yeah.
Or even
absolutely.
even that Chinese back Dayee back I've got, they're just silly prices, really.
Yeah.
So, that Kraken camera, the 6x12, friend of the Lensless podcast, Cesare Bartchak, who makes Vermeer, there's a classic name, pinhole cameras out of Slovakia, maybe, or Poland, one of those two. He makes a 6x12 or 6x17 wooden camera for less than €200. That takes a 90mm 4x5 lens, I think.
Okay.
And he handcrafts pinhole cameras for sale for not a lot of money, and so there's a world of opportunities out there, and it doesn't matter how we end up at them, and some people are just like me. I've got two thumbs, really. I couldn't, I can make a pinhole camera out of a tin can by, I can make a pinhole and do stuff like that. But I've got this idea about making a wooden box-in-box camera, and that frightens the life out of me, So you were very kind enough to show yours, which the listeners to this podcast couldn't see.
Right.
But maybe you can share some pictures into the Facebook group.
Eric, for sure. Absolutely.
Because I don't think one's any better than the other. I think there must be a tremendous satisfaction if you can make a beautiful wooden camera and you see some awesome results. Great objects of beauty.
I just want to interrupt on this because it's interesting. Because Andrew, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think I actually set my answer as a reaction to the way that the question was put to me.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Because I felt like I needed to tip the balance back a little bit, if you like.
Yeah.
So that's just an observation there. And because I'm there thinking, is what I do the same as somebody lovingly applying lacquer and finishing it off? No, it's not. There's a higher skill level there, although it could be said that some of the people that can do that, they would struggle perhaps to do some of the things that I can do in the relatively short time I've been learning how to do CAD and things like that. But it's about what makes people tick, and some people are far better with the hands, and some people are happy with computers, and so on. We're all different.
Right.
But another quick observation. This chat that we're having is I'm really enjoying it, and I want it to continue in the way that it's going. And I'm thinking that we're taking up a great deal of time. Where at the end of the day, this show is about Erik, and it's not about us. And I'm thinking that I don't want this section to be curtailed. Because we haven't even got to what Erik's been up to at the moment, and then we would normally dive deeper into Erik. And I'm thinking that what we should do here is we should just stick on the train of thought that we're going at this moment. And Erik, if you would like to come back potentially for the next show, and then we do part 2 and we actually talk a little bit more about yourself. How does that sound to you?
Sure, I'd love that. My only regret is that we're not in some geographic location where we could actually do this in a pub or someone's backyard with a pint or two, and do it proper, as they say. But yeah, I would love that for sure, 100%.
Excellent. So let's carry on in this vein, and.
So I have to, sorry Simon, but I now have to apologise to those folks who have tuned in, having sold the podcast largely on the ride slow, take photos kind of premise and the dollar bill lenses,
right?
So
which we can talk about a little bit as well as part of this, and to swing back to, I realized I may have loaded the question of handmade versus 3D and whatnot a little bit. And my apologies. I meant no offense. And after I asked it and I started to hear the answer, you're absolutely right. To be clear, I'm crap at woodwork and I'm a crap at 3D files. So either which way, I'm just kind of crap and I kludge my way through it. That's why my first lenses were made with dollar bills, because I can roll paper and apply, adhesive backed foam and, go from there. Somehow that made a lens, I'm not sure how sometimes exactly how that worked, but it worked. But I think, you're right. There's a tremendous amount of talent required to look at a flat screen and visualize something that's in your head into a 3D file, into dimensionality on a flat screen, and then make it come out, use the tools at hand. 3D printers, you don't just, my understanding, I've never used one, but you don't just let it fly. Like they have to print at a certain speed, or the material gets too hot or too weak, it weakens. Your print goes to shite. I'm doing my best to like translate. Your print goes to shite and you have to do it all over again. And a really big piece could take like 48 hours of continuous printing. And it's more laborious and labor intensive than I think a lot of people think. I think a lot of folks think that, oh, you 3D print it, it's just like, boom, away we go, done. And it's not quite to that state yet. And so it is absolutely what you do. If you're making something original, it's really pretty amazing. I'm awestruck by a lot of the things that folks do on 3D printers. My limitation is I just can't wrap my head around 3D files. Like every time, like I might look at 3D files, like, oh, I wonder if I could like cobble that together with my hands somehow. Like take that design and do it with cheap wood, because that's what I do most of my things with, because I don't have a lot of money, so cheap it is. And I would just like look at it, sort of like like a chimpanzee staring at like something new for the first time, just sort of staring at it, going, what is this? And then I throw it over my shoulder and I go do something else poorly advised. But yeah, I think the folks who are making things from scratch and 3D printing them is amazing. Like you and James, and I'm spacing out his name, but there's a really incredible large format camera builder in Israel who's making some cameras that are just mind-blowingly good. Are incredible. And to, I think it was to Andrew's point, it is kind of the great democratizer, sort of like digital cameras, for better or worse, really leveled the playing field and opened up photography to a lot more people who never really were able to do it before. Right. Mm-hmm. And towards that, the ability to just, make a camera or even print a camera, if you're not technically minded, and just get into film photography of some type in some weird way, for not a lot of money, has democratized film photography, large medium format, 35 millimeter, to a massive degree, right? You can order up a Dora Goodman camera or use her files to build a really interesting medium format camera based around, I think it's can't remember which, it's a 6.7 back, where all you need to do is buy the 6.7 back and a lens, right? And it's pennies on the dollar compared to buying a Hasselblad.
Yeah.
Right? And you've assembled it yourself. Yeah. And that's pretty fucking cool, right?
It is, and it's that thing, I mean, we don't really do the digital versus analog thing here, but the digital world has enriched, although it killed film off in a enormous way, and it'll never be the same.
Right.
But now people are shooting. Oh, I can't use that. Making no, okay, shooting film. So, we're making images, making pictures. But I think that the people that are out there making images with film now are, as if you look at things as a people are doing it because they want to do it. Back in the day, people did it because they had to do it. That was the only way to make photographs. Now, people can choose to make digital photographs. They can hybridize. They can do all of these things. But I think that it allows for people's passion people are really passionate about what they do now, and the internet, and whether it be social media and things like that. That's double-edged swords, as we've gone into in the past. It's that information is going all around the world. I mean, people talk about make sure you print your photographs, but if you don't print it, who's going to see it? Well, actually, far more people are ever going to see the photographs I've taken because I've scanned them and they've shared them on social media. But yes, I haven't got them, and we've talked about this before, and only last week in the last show. But ultimately, people are seeing people's images, and it's inspiring other people to do something similar, or think, oh, I could do something like that next.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, we won't tilt at the windmill of social media, because people, especially here in America, like we're talking about social media's effects on society to a massive degree right now. It's like an overdue conversation, for better or worse. But with that said, there's no way I could have gone down the various rabbit holes that I've gone down without the internet. When I decided I needed to make my own lenses because I was too poor to buy old brass lenses for a project, the information on lens design, was there. It's so simple to find really technical drawings for like those old brass lenses, for example. The single element landscape lens, the Petzval, the Globe, like all those early to late 1800s groundbreaking optical designs, which are both shockingly simple and complex. So they're all right there. And in addition, the math on how to figure out what a focal length is when you combine two elements. Like there's a little group on Flickr that's a handmade lens group, and the guru there just like freely posts these formulas. And you're going to find I say this about myself a lot, but I'm crap at math. But this is a basic formula that even I could figure out. And that just set me on my way. Away we went. And that sort of thing, like I don't know that you can really pre-internet easily go to your local library and find a book on photographic lens theory and design. No. Like you couldn't, right? We couldn't do what we do in this brave new world of large format photography, sticking into it without that.
Yeah, or you could find it, but it'd be written in a very technical way, and it'd be written for people like-minded. It wouldn't be written in a way that ordinary people that are not educated in that area right. would understand.
Yeah, and you wouldn't see other people like you muddling through it, making their mistakes that you can learn from, because it's all just recorded right there. Well, I just tried this thing, it didn't come out, and then one of the experts goes, oh, that's because you needed to do blah, right? And they're like, oh, and then it works. And then you, as the person who's learning, can learn from the mistakes of the folks who just did it maybe 2 years ago, because the internet, for better or worse, remembers everything. And I wouldn't be able to find these lens elements, like the lens element supplier, the surplus shed, by the way, total props. Fred at the surplus shed has all sorts of surplus optical elements for really inexpensive plano, double convex, concave, achromats, cemented achromats, whatever. All kinds of crazy shit. Like Fred's got so much stuff. And you just go there and start plugging the numbers where I want a achromat lens of this diameter range and this focal length range. Go. Coated, not coated. Go. And boop, there they are. And you're like, okay, I'll take this one and this one and this one, order them up, ship them to me, and I'm building lenses. Right? Pre-internet, you wouldn't even know those places existed, let alone getting an up-to-date catalog to be able to say, oh, Fred, I'm building this camera. I'm building, case in point, I'm building an 1800s design, single element, large format landscape lens. Circa 1830s, these, people can't see it, but the original camera lens was a landscape lens. It was a single element chunk of glass with the aperture placed in front of it, because that's how it was done. Apertures behind the lenses didn't happen, at least not for these things, and so being able to say, hey, Fred, I need a 180 millimeter achromat that will cover a 4x5 or larger, that's coated, you can, this yellow coating, that I can turn into a period correct camera lens. That would have been needle in a haystack. Let alone finding somebody who has it surplus and not for frontline costs. This is the piece of glass I have in this particular lens that I'm holding in my hand. This is a $90, $120 or more dollar chunk of optically correct coated glass, right? Achromat. I got it from the surplus shed for $15.
Oh, wow.
Like, okay, here we go. And it's a brilliant, beautiful, big, beautiful glass element. It's just awesome, and without the internet, I don't know that I could have done it. I know. I mean,
you have
I'm
fantastic
80.
people in America, don't you? Surplus Shed.
Yeah, Google surplusshed.com. Fred, he's awesome. He's a really nice guy. Every once in a while, there's something that I'll want, and I know I'll be building a lens for it with it, and I'll just ping him an extra note to say, "Hey, man, because sometimes it's all surplus, so sometimes there might be some sort of scoring on it, or there might be a little bit of mildew, like not saying mildew, but like some sort of degradation of the element." And so if it's something I'm really, really, really putting my head down on, I want to come out really well, I can just drop him a note on the email, say, "Hey, Fred, I'm making a lens out of this. Can you make sure the elements you send me are as clean as possible?" And he'll be like, "Yeah, okay." And you'll just take him out you can tell when he get it, because it's a little bit unwrapped, and he'll check it, make sure it's good, and send it, and take a little bit of extra care if you ask him. That was just a really nice gentleman. I can't recommend Fred at the Surplus Shed enough. And he'll even have like old projector lenses. So if you want to like shoot, because projector lenses are amazing portrait lenses, right? Especially on a 4x5 on a speed graphic, man, they're so good. And he is constantly getting in projector lenses, f3.8s, whatever else, made by really reputable companies. He actually has some incredible twin lens setups that were made for a portrait company. Like, in America, they used to be, they have your high school your photos, right? Every year that you go and you get your school photo, and then your parents buy them and send them out to your relatives. Do you do that in the UK? In England?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a company that specialized in that, and they made their own cameras with these big bulk loaded film canisters on the back, medium format. And they contracted with Pentax to make, it was a TLR. They contracted with Pentax to make these beautiful zoom lenses for those. Just stunning. Always wide open at like F whatever. And when they went out of business, Fred bought all their lens surplus. And so he's got just a ton of these stunning 105 to I think 150 zoom portrait lenses that are built by Pentax in his inventory.
Did you know about this guy, Simon?
No, well, I mean, he's in the States, so...
well, Johnny might. Your American buddy Johnny might know.
He probably does.
It sounds incredible.
And actually, shockingly enough, I believe if you talk to the guys over at Intrepid, I think they might have sourced their first, for the Intrepid 4x5 Mark I, they might have sourced the ground glasses for that from Fred. If not Fred, from somebody else, because those are surplus Kodak 4x5 ground glasses in the Intrepid Mark I. At least that's what one of the guys from Intrepid said to me when I mentioned the Surplus Shed and ground glasses. Like, yeah, our Mark I 4x5 ground glasses are Kodak surplus. And I think he got them from Fred at the Surplus Shed.
Those, while you're on the subject of ground glass for 4x5 cameras, I know Steve Lloyd of Chroma Cameras, who we mentioned most shows. You familiar with Chroma?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a guy who can visualize something and come up with a design almost instantaneously. But he sources his ground glass from guy on eBay in Vilnius, and I think his name is Vergis or something like that. I can put the links into the show note. And he produces extremely well-made and bright ground glass screens for not a very lot of money. I replaced one in my bomb homemade in my bomb Italian camera, and I think it was shipped to me for £15.
Oh damn! Okay.
And he makes them. I've replaced one in my Rolleiflex. He'll make them for custom sizes for you, and he does a superb job.
That's good to know.
I've mentioned him a few times in the Facebook group, and he's well known and very reasonably priced as well.
Yeah, I'll have to get in touch with him.
I'll post the notes. It'll be in the show notes, Eric, and also I'll post into the group his details.
That's perfect.
I think it's Vergit or something like that. His name is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because going back to large format and hand making stuff, finding when you build lenses, which is what I'm getting vaguely somewhat known for, which is weird to say. Like I'm starting to get known for things that aren't bad. Finding glasses big enough, but also, finding, figuring out like the sizes and, like Fred, also not to plug Fred again, like, he figured out that, people, like the other source for really interesting glass, so not just glass elements, but barrels, is from the telescope world. Like the telescope folks, they make these massive telescopes, including assembling like their own lens assemblies, right? And so as large format camera lens builders, one of the best sources, or even medium format, of like really high quality lens elements and housings for them is telescopes. Like this here, and I'll post photos in the Facebook group and whatnot. I'll send you photos. This thing right here is a lens I built using a 2-inch telescope eyepiece barrel. That's threaded to take inserts that hold lenses, right? And so you just slip your lens element into these threaded inserts, and you thread it into the lens barrel, and put a couple of them in there, and all of a sudden you got a lens assembly, and you've got a metal barreled camera lens. That, depending on where you put the elements and some other weird technical shit, will work perfectly well with a 4x5 or with medium format. And so there's all this really arcane, fun stuff floating around there. That's just, it's just a blast to play with, But I think to loop that back into the conversation of like making your own or printing out other people's stuff, I think there's also something to be said for taking something that's pre-existing, right? Like those old Kodak pocket cameras, or these beautiful late 1800s, early 1900s brass lenses with a shutter, and like playing with them, modifying them. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't take a Rochester Camera Company shuttered lens that covers a 5x7 in the case of a lens I've been using a lot recently, and just taking the front element out and replacing it with an element of your own, and completely messing with the image, and just getting something really interesting and unique. And you don't need to recreate the entire thing. You just have to replace one piece, and you can get something really interesting and distinct and unique. On that is yours.
On that subject, she was going to be a planned guest for this podcast, but she moved away from large format, and eventually she actually moved away from film, and that's somebody called Isabel Cordes, and we had her instead of coming on here, she came on to the Classic Lenses podcast instead. Obviously, it was more appropriate, and she, apart from being just an absolutely incredibly fascinating person, one of the things that she did, and what I don't know if she's still doing it at the moment, but she keeps on changing through her phases of whatever she's doing. But she was doing exactly what you just said there. She was taking lenses and taking them apart, and sometimes she would just get an element from another lens wherever she found it, and she would just place that, hold it in front of the proper camera lens, if you like, of a camera, and free lens it and tilt it and do all sorts of things. And she was doing these generally on macro shots, because you've obviously magnifying the images a bit that way, right? And she's getting these absolutely incredibly beautiful abstract shots of everyday objects, which you haven't got a clue half the time what you're even looking at, because the distortion is just so great, and this way she's lit things and so on. So experimenting with lens elements it can be hugely satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's actually putting a third element in front of, or a new element in front of an existing lens. It's not too different than those sort of lens kits that people sell for phones now, right? That's all you're really doing, is taking a single element of some kind that's either going to make the image wider or deeper, right? Telephoto or wide or whatever, and just clipping in front of the existing lens on the phone. It's the exact same thing. And they used to make, back in the day, as they say, like convertible large format lenses where the original length is 180, and then this was sold in this wooden box with different things. They just unscrew it and screw another one on, and they would change the lens length entirely. The optical quality of those weren't, typically in my understanding, weren't great. I've never laid my hands on one. But in principle, it was a really, really interesting thing. And they weren't super common. I think they were more expensive than other lenses or what have you. But it was a fascinating thought. Like, I have built a couple different lenses where it's like, okay, now if I just like take this, unscrew this one and put this one in, I've just converted it from a 90 to, usually it's easier to go shorter, but from like a 180 down to a 150, for example. And that sort of thing it's super fun. It's also fascinating. It's like just taking something and twisting it around and seeing what you can do with it. And that's, I don't know, I love it, honestly.
Erik, this lens that I've got, which I think is similar to that one on the blue lens board, blue lens board from people watching in, people listening in color. I've just been staring at this. I ripped it off a Kodak number 3 folding camera. It was a huge thing.
Yep.
I had sitting on my shelf for years with holes in the bellows. And I finally realized that the lens I could do something with, but the camera is just shit, really. Mm-hmm. And so I mounted it, and I've not actually used it yet, but I'm just reading what it says. And this is great fun, isn't it? So it says for F64, marine clouds and snow. F32 apparently is distant view.
Yep.
F16 average view. F8 near view portrait. F4 shadow and moving objects. And then on the shutter speed, it's got 1 second, very dull, two, half a second, dull, a fifth of a second, grey, a 25th of a second, clear, a hundredth of a second, moving objects, brilliant.
Brilliant. And that actually, that number 3,
yeah, go on.
That number 3 is the one that you can convert to panoramic.
Yeah, but not the one I had, you couldn't.
Not the one you had, yeah. I mean, those things shot a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches. Sorry, negative. It's damn near,
And it's
the speed.
Roll film, wasn't it? Weird roll film.
Massive roll film. But there are converters, just spool converters you can get that'll just convert that size camera to 120, and you get a 4 1/4 inch long panoramic.
Wow.
Huge.
I mean, it's almost sort of the frame size is almost large. I can't remember the size of it now, but it's huge, isn't it?
So, the frame size, it's a postcard camera. So it actually is technically large format. We're keeping in the large format vein. Like the speed graphic that I took on the Butterfield trip that you see in the Ride Slow Take Photos, that's a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Technically, that's a large format. Those Kodak number 3s, roll film or not.
You'll start the Angry Brigade now, right into the
do it.
Large format. That's not large format.
Debate me. But I mean, if you use 120 film in it, maybe it's not. But its original format absolutely was 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. That's it's massive. It's huge, right? I mean, technically, large format goes down to. I mean, you could almost you can't. I was gonna say you can't quite argue that the baby speed graphics, the old 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 inch. Essentially 6 by 9, for lack of a better size.
We can, and we have. And
we have argued it both ways.
That was largely
because
both ways. I bought one by mistake, that pretty much.
Lots of people are buying those by mistake. I nearly bought one by mistake, and then Max Cooper, who I've been chatting with, he bought one by mistake as well.
They're brilliant. I mean, those little things, you convert them to a 6:9 back.
Yeah.
Right? 6 by 9 roll film back, and as long as your rangefinder is accurate, those things are great. Even if you shoot sheet film with it, they're great. They're small, they're lively, they're portable, they're quick. As long as the rangefinder is accurate to whatever lens you're putting on the front. Those little baby speed graphics are really, really fucking wonderful.
I'm shooting glass plates in my Rolleiflex. So is that large format?
Yeah, right. It's a good question. Oh, you managed to get one of those sheet film backs for the Rolly, huh?
Yeah.
Those are rare like hen's teeth. I'm pulling out all the funny phrases. Bob's your uncle, hen's teeth. but yeah, those threes and those lenses are really good, man. This one, the one I've been playing with, the one I shot, I can send a link to this too, to a photojournalism project in Oklahoma based around the land runs. It was the last great disenfranchisement of Native Americans. We've been doing it continuously, but the last large historical one. So I wanted to shoot something that was more period correct, and I used this really pretty Rochester Optical Company lens. And I was hoping just to shoot it straight, but it's off of a 5x7 camera. So as much as I tried to make it misbehave and give me some sort of character on my Intrepid 4x5, I couldn't get it to do anything interesting. It was just too sharp, edge to edge, because it's optically built for a 5x7. So even wide open, I got no bokeh. It was just sharp as any modern lens I've ever used. It's just, they're brilliant. So that's why I had to replace the front element to get some sort of character in it. Otherwise, it just looked like I was shooting a modern camera on orthochromatic film, and there's nothing period about the results. I was shocked at how sharp this old lens was. Just beautiful. I still have the original lens element. I can swap it back to its original, like, actual functional beauty compared to my Hackery. But I was really surprised. And so for those of you out there who are listening, if you're looking for like an affordable large format lens that'll cover 4x5 with movements, with front movement, full front movement, start hunting up like those late 1800s. Like this lens, I think, was copyrighted in 1896 or so. Those late 1800s 5x7 brass lenses, or 4x5. But if you just want edge to edge sharpness and a really well behaving lens that'll shoot brilliantly, that can be had quite cheaply, these things are it. Like, I can't. Simon, have you found a lot of these lenses floating around in your purchase runs?
They certainly pop up, and there's one that I've talked about on quite a few occasions when I bought a half frame camera, and which I sent to Andrew, and he was too scared to use. You don't mean half frame, you mean half plate.
Oh,
sorry, half plate.
Yeah,
sorry,
half plate.
Sorry. We've been talking so much about gear this week. I thought I'd gone back into the Classic Lenses podcast.
Well, I'm not sure what podcast we're in. We're either in the Lensless, the homemade camera podcast, Classic Lenses podcast, and maybe a Push the Large Format Photography podcast.
This is clearly a reaction to Shane in the last show calling me a gearhead and calling me out as a gearhead quite correctly, and because we've had quite a good run of having good artistic, meaningful discussions, but I've come alive talking about gear.
Well, I was rather hoping we might have another one of those tonight, but maybe that'll be the next show with Erik.
It's not going to happen tonight.
I can do that. And I apologize, actually, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. This is entirely my fault. I do tend to skip all over the place from like gear, because I find it all interesting. Like, I find the equipment really interesting. I find the history of things interesting. Like what was made and when and why is fascinating. The results they get, like achromatic film or glass plates or dry plates, like that look and feel versus panchromatic, and how those came across, and the results they get and how unique those results are, versus like even like the Kodachrome that had two colors because America didn't have dyes, because all the dyes came from Germany. And World War II cut that off. America didn't have dye until we went to war with Germany and we lost all of our dye. Like that shit's fascinating to me. But also, I think getting unique artistic results that feel good to you, right? In the end, no matter how deep we dive into gear, the results, the emotional impact of the results on you as a photographer are intensely important, right? Because the first person you need to satisfy is yourself. And if you're not emotionally invested and happy with the work that you do, you're never going to be able to represent it to anybody else, or to go to somebody and say, this is the work I do, right? Because if you do that and like, yeah, this is the work I do, and they'll be like, yeah, well, if you don't care, why do we care? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so I might dive into gear and the process because I'm handsy. I'd like to be mentally occupied. And once I do something well, I immediately skip to the next thing. It drives my fiance completely batshit crazy. She's like, you just got good at that. Why are you trying to do something else? I'm like, because I'm bored and I want to go do something else. And she just throws things at me. And she's justified. I'm not blaming her for throwing things at me because of mental curiosity. But at the same time, if I'm unable to get really interesting results that are emotionally good to me, fuck it. Why bother? Right? Like, I think Shane would say that. I think Jenny would say that. Right? I think James, his cyanotypes that he shoots and the stuff that the results he gets out of shooting redshifts or whatever. Like, if he didn't really, really like those images, he wouldn't be building that crazy ass camera.
No.
And you guys wouldn't be doing the things you do. Right? So I think that the end product is a sum of everything that it takes to get there. And that product is only satisfying if you've invested yourself into it.
I wonder if Simon touched on, well, we got onto this discussion earlier, didn't we? Or you two did, really, about digital photography and how it's brought photography to the masses. Everyone's a photographer now, and you can get stunning results on your iPhone. In fact, when I was in the Lake District, I did this panoramic shot, and I had to question whether I need to carry on with large format photography because, the iPhone XR, whatever it is, I press a button, move the camera around, and I just got this incredible panoramic shot. Now, I don't know, probably couldn't enlarge it a great amount. I don't know. But do you think that very, very clearly it's led to a stabilization of the decline of film photography at the least, and depending on who you talk to, maybe a bit of an increase in film usage? Do you think it's that perhaps lack of emotional involvement, in snap, and all of that, so you'll end up with 20 images, all kind of from the same location, but maybe, left a bit up, a bit down.
Yeah. I think
there must be more. There must be more to it, to satisfy this artistic or this sort of this need to be creative.
Right.
And does that draw people to film photography? Do you think?
Yeah, I think okay, we're gonna get some comments from this, but sorry in advance. But yes, in a nutshell, all the yes. And here's absolutely. And I'll dive into this a little bit. So one of my hands down favorite documentary photojournalists, I think the greatest living documentary photographer right now, and arguably one of the greatest ever, is Eugene Richards, right? And you're familiar? Either of you familiar with his work at all?
I will be when I've done the show notes and researched it.
Oh my God, his work is stunning, and the interesting. So a few things about Gene is, like, one, traditionally, like, he's a very nice, gentle, almost unassuming man, and his photographs are really intimate. Like, he generally doesn't shoot unless he's almost close enough to touch you, and that requires a great deal of trust with his subjects. But I saw this great interview with him where they talked about, like, when did you switch to digital and why? And he said, well, really, I just did. This interview was a few years back, and it's because the publishing industry demands it. It's cheaper for the publishing industry to take these files and deal with them than it is to pay to have your work developed and scanned and messed with. It's just cheaper and faster. And that was really the driving factor behind the popularization and acceptance of digital initially. Had nothing to do with the masses. It had everything to do with publishing, right? Newspapers, magazines. That's what really drove the industry to digital. but in terms of like how he worked, he said that he found himself shooting more, right? And just shooting a lot more, and I'm paraphrasing, right? These aren't his words, but essentially a lot more images that were less meaningful because he could, right? He could just like shoot a shit ton more than he could ever with film. And he found himself like essentially unhappy because like his work changed as a result. And he really had to check himself to be like, stop it. Essentially stop shooting like a digital photographer. And I think because there's no ramifications for shooting 500 fucking images. I mean, just like there's a give me a good one in there somewhere, right? Woo. And so I think that digital photography in general leads to less care taking an image, less technical care, because you can always do something in Photoshop with it, right? You can always, as long as the basic image is there, you can screw with the levels and you can pull out detail and you can run a filter on it to reduce the noise and tighten it up and pull something out of something. Whereas if you underexpose by 2 stops on film, you're fucked. You've got nothing, right? Nothing. And that lack of care and that lack of ramifications for your mistakes brings to me a lot less emotional value to the work. And that's not to say that there aren't really talented, like there's some photographers here locally in the journalism pool shooting for the Chronicle and Reuters and New York Times, who are friends of mine and are out there on the daily, and it's fire season, right? Yeah. Wildfire season. And the work they're producing is heartbreakingly immense with digital. So that's not to like throw the whole thing out and say, fuck digital, it's all crap. But they are professionals with an eye who care deeply for their subjects. And that carries through. That's universal, right? But for those of us who aren't in that class, just the everyday photographer, there's so many more images now. There's so many pretty landscapes. There's so many pretty sunsets. Like sometimes I feel, like the sky here in California turned a terrible, terrible, deep, angry orange a few weeks ago. I'm sure you saw it on the news from the wildfire smoke. Like it felt like the end of the world. I barely shot anything because I knew everybody was fucking out there, with their phones, getting amazing photos. And I'm like, why am I going to bother? Why bother? Because everybody can produce a nice photograph. Instagram is full of nice photographs. But
if that encourages, without Instagram and without all those social media and without your iPhones,
right?
It does lead now to some of those people wanting to take things further.
Yes.
Wanting to, satisfy themselves in a way perhaps that they're not able to get with an Instagram filter.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I've also long said that, I take plenty of photos on my phone, that
Me too.
It's like a good sketchbook. Like it allows you to practice framing, practice how you see things, where you put your focus, so that when the cards are down and you're taking a photograph that's actually meaningful, the technical parts of it are automatic. And you can concentrate on capturing that moment, that emotion, that really difficult scene on your film camera or on your high-end digital camera, and actually nailing that, and not like ham-fisting the shutter speed or this stuff. Like there's a lot to be said with that practice, and digital makes that practice a hell of a lot more affordable and accessible. This two film stacking process, you can't really practice that with a digital camera. And I've gone out and shot these scenes like 3 times now, like combined 40, 50 sheets of film each fucking bloody time, plus developing, and it hurts when you make the mistake. Like, it hurts because you put so much time and energy to essentially a carefully planned out, best possible trial run. It just sucks when it doesn't come out, and you got to go out and do it again or give up. And it's I've been banging my head against this bichrome thing for like 4 weeks now. I'm almost ready. If this run this weekend doesn't go through, I'm gonna have to give it up, because it must not be viable for me and how I work. So yeah. Ugh, God.
Well, you can tell us more about that in part 2, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That film is drying right now in the bathroom. But I think back to the point of like digital versus film. I think for most people, it's made it accessible, and for the folks who really get into it, it really pushes them to get into maybe something they wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. Although you could argue, like, if somebody has an artistic bent, they'd have gone that deep with regular photography. Artists and photojournalists will always be artists and photojournalists. Maybe it allowed a larger group of people to realize they have that drive and to chase it down. And if that's the case, then God bless, that's awesome. But it really has, I have to question, for better or worse, whether or not the sheer volume of images versus the volume of people that we've gained into film and into artistic or really talented photography, how even that distribution is. Have we 300x our volume of photographs to get like 3x the number of people in that class? And how many photographers and photo studios and photojournalists have just put the cameras down and left? Right? There's fewer photographers than ever working at newspapers and magazines. Some newspapers have completely, in really short-sighted ways, cut their photography staff entirely and like given their fucking reporters iPhones. I can't remember which Chicago newspaper did that. Their results are complete crap, and they realized it a year later. But like, in terms of can you sustain a living doing photography standpoint, is that a smaller pool of people than it ever was because of digital? I would argue yes. I would argue there are fewer photographers earning a genuine living doing photography now than there ever were.
Yeah.
And that fucking sucks. Yeah. Not to be a downer about it, but I think that's not to cry in my beer or anything, but I think that's a reality.
Yeah, and I think I didn't really want to end it on a downward spiral, but this is only part 1,
right?
And we're going to be doing a part 2, because there's still so much to talk about,
right? And we cannot end it on downward spiral, because there's positives, right? Like, there's so much beautiful art, and there's so many things that we get to see that otherwise we would never see. And things that you and I and Simon, that we realize, oh shit, that exists. This tourist went there and shot this thing. Where is that? I want to go do that. I want to photograph that. Yeah. And so for those of us who really pursue it, either for a living or just because we're bonkers about it, the sky's the limit, because we know about so much more visually than we ever did.
Yeah.
And people, like, you can ping somebody who took that photo with the iPhone and be like, dude, where was that? How do I get to that? And they'll share, like, oh man, that's 3 miles in on this place there. This is where you go. Or that's my uncle's, my uncle's cousin has this little factory, whatever. Drop my name, go there. It's cool. Yeah. Right.
I was going to say, and just hope you don't get the person that chops the tree down after taking the amazing photo.
Right. Yeah. That jackass. And so, like, those opportunities there's so many more opportunities to make really amazing images in the way that you want to make them. Back to that, like, the way that is emotionally, that is satisfying to you. Right. And so, it's not entirely a downer. It's a tough world in some ways to be a photographer, but it's also arguably one of the most magical times ever to be a photographer. I mean, you can literally be a photographer in any bloody way you want to now. Yeah. Digital, film, whatever. It's and that's awesome. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Erik, it's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you.
Yeah.
I'm watching you as well. I could get into watching guests. It's quite voyeuristic, isn't it, when they can't see me?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you get the back of a really pretty camera and a harvester, and you're fine. It's cool. I think you might be, if I really focus in on your profile image, I think your camera might be level.
Right. Let's start to wind things down.
Yep.
The first thing I want to do is to say thank you to those people that have managed to find our coffee site and help us out a little. And I've got to say, I don't know what's happened here, because last time we only had like a couple of people, and but we seem to have got quite popular since the last show with the chain. So the people specifically since the last time I want to say thank you to are Christopher J. May, who left a message to say, being a bit again, gents, have a couple of coffees on me. Thank you very much, Christopher. Then there's Sire List, who says, you've had a run of top flight podcastery. Thank you. But what would make it even better, by the way, I'm dyslexic, so I really struggle with this, would be to have you two standing in a ploughed field on a freezing fen morning, trying to work a shutter. So here's a few quid towards that outside broadcast unit you've mentioned. So thank you very much. I mean, it's got to be said, we were down to meet Dave Shrimpton last Friday, and we were going to record an outside broadcast somehow. But I think the views on COVID sort of put that to an end again, didn't they?
Yeah.
Simon, just to, while you reminded me that just this weekend gone, our dear friend Jack Lowe of the Lifeboat Project fame was doing some unveiling of a large print of the lifeboat crew in Stiffkey. Now, I'm not expecting you to know where Stiffkey is, Simon.
No.
But it's in North Norfolk, probably less than an hour from me. And I just couldn't get up there this weekend gone. And that was a perfect opportunity. Jack Lowe, because I follow him on Patreon, he said, I'm going to be in Stiffkey. We were unveiling a large blow-up of a collodion image I made of the lifeboat crew last year sometime. But I know he posted on Friday night, the wind was howling, and I think he managed to get out and get some publicity and stuff, for his project. But that was a perfect opportunity. I could have been up there doing a large format photography podcast, outside broadcast, if we had any gear to do it with.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. So just we've got more. We've done well this week. Yeah. Shug Pug has made a donation to us. Thank you very much. Then there's Buzz, and Buzz wrote.
Are you making all these names up, Simon?
No, and people are really deliberately coming up with the hard to read names as usual. And Buzz, and I can read that. Gentlemen, I'm just getting into large format, catching up with all the episodes and learning lots. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Buzz, and glad to hear
Thanks,
that
Buzz.
we're helping people along. Sorry, Andrew, were you going to say something?
I was just thanking Buzz.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Buzz.
Yep. Then there's Christoph Sieglin. I think I've said that right. As if I hadn't enough cameras, I am now the proud owner of a 4x5. How great is that? It's epic. Well done, hard. Christoph. It's obviously all your fault. Here come the coffees. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, Christoph. And then finally, Colin Devro. A few coffees to hear Simon mispronounce my name. I think I got it right. Not Devro, of course. Devro. So
what did you call him?
He's going to have to write in and let him know.
Yeah, I said Colin Devro. Oh, or is he a Colin?
Devro? What did you call him? Devro?
No, Colin Devro. Not
you didn't call him Colin, did you? Because that's proper American.
It is American, isn't it? That is the way over there. No, Devro, as opposed to Devereaux. So there we go. So thank you very, very much, because that will go some way to actually coming up with something that we're going to use to do an outside broadcast recording. So thank you.
We've got lots of plans, haven't we, for outside broadcast recordings?
Yeah, and never get there at all. Damn COVID. Okay, so that's it. We've still got emails which we haven't done, and we will do. Who knows? Yeah, we might enlist Erik to help us out with emails next time.
Happily. Yeah. Send them over. I'll do it.
That's it. So, okay. So, Erik, it's been absolutely fantastic having you with us.
Yeah, thank you. This has been, really entertaining and fun and completely random. I promise I'll be more focused next time. I promise. Pinky swear.
Yeah. Well, I'm not.
My fiance is looking at me right now going, no, you're not.
Yeah, we're not going to hold you to that. So then, people have many people would have heard you for the first time, but you're out there. So how can people catch up with some of the things and perhaps see the things that you've done on video or whatever? How can people find out what you do?
Probably the single best way. I mean, I have a website, but like most of us, we never maintain our website. It's like one of those things. Instagram I'm most active on Instagram, which is just ErikHmathy is my Instagram handle. Be prepared for photographs, large format photography, pictures of lenses that I build myself, with cameras I build myself, and rabbits. We have pet rabbits, and they're adorable. So you're going to get inundated with, like this podcast, a lot of random crap. And hey, man, it's fair. And then I'll change my link on that to the Ride Slow Take Photos trailer, so folks can follow that over and see what that trailer is about. But that's really probably the single safest, most active place.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. And Andrew, actually, I'll come back to Erik. Have you got any shout outs you want to say to anybody that might be listening?
Well, for sure, huge props and thanks to Looking Glass Photo here in Berkeley. They are the sole place in what is known as the East Bay of San Francisco for photographic equipment, supplies, traditional darkroom supplies, film, and the rest. And then if you're over in San Francisco, go to Glass Key Photo. They're the purveyor of...
Been there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, those guys are great, man.
Been there.
They're so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys they're wonderful, wonderful. Have you been to the new shop?
No, because they were broken into, weren't they? And heavily vandalized.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you went down to the shop on the shop.
I was there in 2 or 3 years ago, 2016.
Yeah, they've got a new space, Gordon, and those guys are awesome. And then, probably next would definitely be Adobe, because they're the ones who got interested, Adobe Create. They got interested in what I do, and we'll talk about this the next time. And they produced a documentary movie about my last big project called Ride Slow Take Photos, which was just an amazing thing to take part of. Again, we can talk about this in the next movie, but like having a film crew following you around is a very disconcerting thing, but also it was just fun because there was a good crew and weird, surreal. We can talk about that later. But huge thanks to Adobe Create for finding sort of fringe artists like myself and giving us the time of day. That was really awesome. And then for those of you in the Bay Area, if you're looking for a bike shop, I can't say enough about Huckleberry Bikes. I'm a photographer with a cycling problem, and my cycling problem is taken care of by Huckleberry bicycles. So when I do these long trips, I do them by bicycle. I do documentary photography with large format equipment by bicycle. And my shop of choice is Huckleberry. So can't thank them enough.
Excellent. Thank you for those. Andrew, have you got a shout out?
Well, I do, yes. Ben Horn, who we've had previous guest on the show, I was watching a video that he put out recently on focus stacking using 8x10 film, which I didn't really know was a thing. I'd heard about it and I kind of had a bit of an idea, but I didn't know you could do it with film. But anyway, he's put out a video on his YouTube channel how he went back to a scene that he'd photographed 8 or 9 years ago, and he's been unhappy with that scene ever since. And he shot brilliant. 3. I know. We'll go on his video because then he talks very thoroughly through how he did it, and then how he work the images together on Photoshop. So go and check that out. And then I messaged my daughter earlier and said, with the clip to Craig's video, and she said, so shout out to my daughter. She said, looks like an interesting guy. I don't know where you find them, crying face. Side note, the song in that clip is by one of my favourite musicians, Courtney Barnett. Did you know that?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Good.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually until the trailer came to me and they were working on licensing. Adobe was.
Okay.
And I sent it to a friend of mine and they're like, that's Courtney Barnett. I'm like, I had no idea.
No, I don't know. I've never heard of her. But then I've got a young daughter. I've got a young daughter who can keep me informed of these things, you see.
Yeah. That's actually too many stories. We're trying to end this. I'll tell you the story about a famous Icelandic band and meeting them in the middle of Arizona while riding my bike down Route 66.
Oh man!
Next time.
We're going to get you on for the next 4 shows.
Yeah. I met Signor Rose on Route 66 and I had no idea who they were. And then when I got done, my friends were like, "You met who?" I was like, "This Icelandic band." They're like, "Signor Rose." I'm like, Yeah, they're really nice. They're like, "You have no appreciation for who you met? They're amazing." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Well, they're really nice." And they're just like, "We hate you."
Excellent.
Yeah. The tour manager is actually in the UK.
Okay.
Anyways.
Yeah, I know that we have technically 3 minutes of time of Andrew, so I'm going to run through my one shout out is probably the one I gave last time, and that's to Graham Jago at the Sunny 16 podcast, or more to the point, Sunny 16 presents, because he's done a solo show, if you like, and he's only just put it out there. I mean, I'm on it. He talks to me, and he also talks to Steve Lloyd, so another mention for Steve Lloyd on the show, and also he spoke to Matt Marash, and it's pretty much justifying why he bought a chroma camera. That's pretty much the entire episode, but from 3 different aspects, I guess. So do have a listen to that, but I'm told it's actually quite good. So,
do you need a justification to buy a chroma camera?
Well,
or any camera?
Not really. I've done it. I've got one on order.
Yeah. What camera do you need? Is your current number of cameras +1?
It's the new Snapshot for me. The new one he's just put out, the one with a bit of movement in, the Snapshot handheld.
Yes.
One, yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's my shout out. Andrew, if anybody wants to get in touch with us, what's the best way to do that?
They can send us an email, Simon.
Yeah.
If they send an email to largeformatphotographypodcast.com. Now, you may not want to do that if you have...
No.
What?
Almost. There is no... Well, there might be a largeformatphotographypodcast.com, but we don't own it.
Don't we?
No.
What is it then?
It's
for goodness sake. I wrote it down at the beginning.
It's largeformatphotographypodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, yeah, at gmail.com.
That's the bit.
Yeah, I just missed that, the Gmail. Well,
and then you too can get your email read by these sultry, dulcet tones.
Yeah, so we've got the 2 that Simon's been threatening to inflict on us for the last 6 months. We're going to get Eric to read out next week. Next time.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So if you want to send any more emails after listening to Eric Part 1, then send it to largeformatphotographypodcast@gmail.com. There you go.
Okay, so how about yourself then? Outside of this show, how can people keep up with the things that you do?
They can listen to me droning on the Lensless podcast every couple of weeks, and hanging out in the Facebook group, Large Format Photography Podcast Facebook group. On Twitter, I'm Warboys Snapper. On Instagram, I'm Warboys Snapper. And that's about it, really.
Okay, well, I have a website called simonforsterphotographic.co.uk where you can buy lens caps and things like that, and very, very soon I will be doing some custom lens boards as well. and I do another podcast which goes out every week called the Classic Lenses Podcast. I'm on Twitter as Simon Four. I'm on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic. We have an Instagram feed, I think best described as a half-arsed Instagram feed for the large format photography podcast, and it's a bit one-way traffic, but there you go. We have one day we will get better. I say we, I mean me. We have a Flickr
page as well by the aforementioned Colin Devereaux.
That's right.
Colin Devereaux.
Well,
so thank you, Colin Devereaux, for I can insult him now. He sent us coffee money for doing a great job on the Flickr group, and we'll at some point we'll dive into the Flickr group and talk about the images on there. I suspect when we haven't got a guest and we're scratching around, we can use the Flickr group to go and interrogate.
Yeah, that's good. There's some good discussions on there, which I really need to get more involved in as well, I must say. So that's certainly a good place for people that don't want to go anywhere near Facebook.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? So our music is by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, and it's called Two Finger Johnny. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show or this fortnight show, whatever it is, and will be great if you can come back again. So goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.